here and there's one over there. So feel free to get your. And then so here's all the classic cars: 50 Chevy pickup, the 55 Thunderbird, 57 Chevy, 65 Ford Galaxy, and 02 Thunderbird. This one he owned. Well, mom.
This one he bought off the lot.
Off the lot, yeah. So,
before I knew that was a dating car.
Yeah. So, and I just heard another really good story about this one that he wouldn't tell me about, but we won't get into that. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So,
You can tell.
so sometimes I have to. Well, it involved some people who maybe weren't 21 and they had some beer and they got rear-ended or something. Yeah. So I don't want to, I don't want to get into that one. So, but anyway. So we're gonna just give people, but yeah, feel free if you want to see the posters on Dad, whatever, and we're gonna just give the wind. We're just gonna give a couple of quick words. And then
That's okay. Good. It's not that big, but everybody knows I don't talk very loud. So, figured you'd like that. Okay, and I had to write it down because otherwise I'll forget. So I'm a lot better at working than talking, which again Dad wouldn't have agreed with, but that's okay. So thank you all for coming. I'm glad that we could do this here in Dad's shop because this is where he was truly alive, and this is where I learned a lot from him. One thing I learned from him is that no matter what you do, to live a good life, you have to follow principles and do so no matter what. There were a lot, and a lot of them were rather colorful, but there were three that stand out, and then I want to tell a short story to put them together. The first is to work harder than anyone else, which is related to another one, which is never ask anyone to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. Working for Dad was hard, but it was always good to know that no matter how hard you were working, he would always work harder. The second is to always do it right, no matter how hard. This means both do it right, or in his words, don't half-ass it. More importantly, it means doing what is right, even if another path is easier. Whenever I stand up to tell the truth, or stand up when it isn't easy, or get argumentative, as some of you may know, he showed me how. The last principle is to give credit when credit is due. And this may surprise some people, because Mark and I always used to have a joke that the only way you would know how you're doing is to ask the other one. Dad would brag about Mark to me, and he would brag about me to Mark. But as he got older, what he used to say is, you're just one of my average kids, whenever you did anything. But when you did something he didn't expect, he would give you so much credit. So everybody here knows, and as you can see, Dad was a mechanical wizard. He could fix anything. And there was twice in my life that I fixed something he couldn't. The first was a belt on a combine that kept breaking, and he thought he would have to replace it. The combine, not the belt.
we replaced the belt, 20 times?
Yeah. And I looked at it and said, you need to change that sprocket, and it'll be fine. He did it, and it never broke again. A little bit of the story that I didn't tell is I worked in a belt factory in Lincoln, so I do some tricks that he would have never been able to see. But that happened 20 years ago, and he was still talking about it last year. Which leads me to the second time I ever did something that he hadn't done, which happened last year. And I think this is a story that ties it all together. So we were getting these two Thunderbirds, we were getting those ready for the parade. And the hood on that Thunderbird has a design flaw. If you pull on the rope, on the wire, it'll snap, and then you can't get the hood open. And you can't get a car ready for something if you can't get the hood open. And so he spent days underneath it trying to get things done. So once again, always do the hardest work, always work hard, and never do anything you wouldn't have anyone else do. So he was under that car for hours just a year ago. And two things that I had that he didn't is I went on the internet and saw that there was a design flaw, and I have these little skinny arms. And so I was able to get to a little hatch in there and got it open. And when I got it there, at first he thought there was some trick. There's no way I could have done it. But then when I did, he wouldn't be quiet. He was so happy that I had done something that you couldn't figure out that he wouldn't stop talking about it. So give credit when credit's due. And then when we had to get things ready, he was always working harder, always doing everything. And it was getting him to slow down and do the work for him and say, look, I need to do all the work harder than anyone else, and I need to do the work that I would never ask anyone else to do. And so getting him to let me do that was really not something he was ready to do, but he was happy. And then when we brought the cars home, it was about ready to rain. And it would have been real easy to just put them in the garage and leave, but we spent the next 3 hours doing it right, no matter how hard. But I spent the time with him, and we put them all in, and when we were done, the next day, as I left, he said, well, Andy, thanks for all the help. Thanks for everything you did. Give credit where credit's due. And I said, well, Dad, thank you for making me somebody who's able to help. That's the last time I saw him. And so what I want to leave you with is you never know when's the last time, but if you follow the right principles, it won't matter because it'll be a good time. Thank you.
Andy, you stole my story. No, I'm just kidding. No, so first off, just thanks to everybody for coming. I mean, it's amazing to see how many people came out here. And obviously, you know, Walt died of COVID and during COVID, and I had COVID, and Mom was in the hospital, so we weren't able to do this at the time. But I think one of the silver linings of that is that, you know, now we've had 7.5 months, and instead of being in shock and completely mourning, you know, this can be kind of a joyous, happy experience, and that's why we call it the celebration of life. And you know, I love hearing stories and hearing people come around. And I mean, we're never going to take this thing completely out of what happened, but it's just nice to kind of. I think that after 7.5 months, you know, every day I'm kind of like Andy said, able to you know, think about the principles that he taught me and go from there and kind of be more okay with everything. But anyway, you know, just we had a this reminds me, we had a kind of a birthday party / anniversary, or it was the 50th year for my mom and dad dating just a few years ago. And he was so thankful that everybody came out, and I see a lot of the same faces. Fortunately, a few people have passed since then, but I just know that he thanked me profusely after we had that party. He would be very happy to see all the faces here and all the people that he impacted. So I appreciate it. So yeah, from Mom, from Karen, from me, from Andy, from our entire family, just thanks a lot. So many of you know that, a lot of you know that Dad and I had a really good relationship as adults. Some of you might know that we didn't really have the best relationship when I was a kid, right, Mom? So, but you know, I think it took me until probably my freshman year in college to realize that he wasn't completely nuts. You know, usually he'd tell me something, and I'd be like, "Ah, crazy old man." And then I kind of go back into my room and I'm like, "Yeah, might be right. I probably shouldn't be going out tonight. It is 40 below." You know, little things like that. But Dad, I'm just going to play basketball, and I'm wearing my shorts. I don't need it. I'm going to go from the pickup directly to the gymnasium. But you know, you kind of learn over time that maybe he wasn't completely crazy. But one of the principles, thinking of stories from high school, this is one of my favorite stories about the principles, is back to that 40 below day. He told me, he said, "If you can beat me in an arm wrestling contest, I'll let you go." And I thought I was a big stud football player. I mean, he's a farmer, out of shape. This will be easy. We went for about 5 minutes. Neither one of us could win. And finally, I just gave up and stayed home. But I think he knew that he wasn't going to lose to me. So I was about Alex's age, and unfortunately, I think that Alex today could beat me. But I'm not working on a farm every day. So, you know, another story from high school that I love to tell is, you know, talk about the principles. And I was usually, I don't know, I felt like I was always trying to do the right thing. Failed miserably a lot of times, but he told me one time, if somebody else starts it, you can finish it. Well, the only fight I ever got into in high school was when somebody knocked on my window. I rolled down the window and they punched me, and all I could think about was Dad's voice going through my head: if they started, you could finish it. So I was able to finish it. So that was a lot of fun. And the other kid got suspended and I didn't, so it was great. But anyway, so you know, a few different principles that Andy talked about, still the same general rules. But anyway, what else did I want to say here? Oh, coming back to you know, principles. The biggest thing, and Andy touched on this quite a bit, but the biggest thing that I realized was working for Dad. Dad was my first boss, and he was also by far the toughest boss I ever had. And he had me absolutely convinced that when I went out to the real world, I was completely worthless and I was going to get blown away by everybody. Well, I went out into the real world and I worked hard because, as Andy said, you always had to be the hardest worker. And I realized that in the real world, not everybody works that hard. So it actually helped quite a bit that he taught me that you know, if you outwork everybody, how can anybody else beat you? And he really did drive that home. And I remember with my first job, I'm like, this is easy. These bosses are nice to me. What's going on? And second job, I'm like, same thing. And then suddenly over time, I just realized that just like Andy said, he wanted to outwork everybody. He wanted to do the right thing. And you know, I think that's something that everybody appreciated about Walt. And you know, those guiding principles that he taught me, those are the things that I'm trying to teach my kids today, or any kids that I'm come in contact with. So in a way, he kind of lives on throughout, just in the way that we're trying to raise our kids and all the youth that we come in contact with. So you know, Dad just had a very big impact on my life, and it's good to know, as I said earlier, that as we you know, we've had 7.5 months to mourn. This should be a time to celebrate, enjoy the cars, enjoy the, come look at the posters if you get a chance. It's kind of interesting. We learned a lot of things that we didn't even necessarily know beforehand. And, you know, just basically, what else? Yeah, just really wanted to say thanks a lot, and thanks for coming. It would mean a lot to him, and I know that he had a big impact on everybody here. So the other thing that we wanted to do, I don't know if anybody wants to, but if anybody wants to come up and say a few words, you're more than welcome. But if not, just have a great day, and thanks for coming.
So yeah, check out the posters, the cars, everything. Stick around, visit, whatever you'd like. If anybody wants to say a few words, feel free, and we'll go from there.
I'm Kathleen. I am Walt's oldest granddaughter. Karen is my mom. She's not here, but I am here. So I don't have a speech, but I just wanted to share some stories, I guess. I called my grandparents a lot, like after college. I almost called like every day just to say, hi Grandma, hi Papa. Sometimes I would call Walt and he'd be like, well, your grandmother's sleeping. And we would just talk about random stuff. And there was a period of time when like my work was really stressful, so I wasn't calling. And then I would call like 2 weeks later, and my papa would be like, well, we always like to hear from you. And it was just really nice. It's like, wow, I don't even say anything to you, and you still like really like to hear what I say. So yeah, and I would like always update him on my job, and one thing that I learned from him too is to work really hard. From him, my grandma, my uncles too. So I would talk to him about my job, and I also would talk to him about my spin class because it was competitive. So I would be like, Papa, I got first in the race today in my spin class. And he'd be like, oh, just keep up your hard work. It's like the smallest thing. Like it didn't mean anything, but it was still competitive. And he was so happy to hear my updates about this like meaningless competitive thing. And once I got in first place, I would always be like, oh, I was almost first place today. And he'd be like, well, just keep working at it and you'll get there. And then I finally got first place once I called. I was like, I did it, Papa. I got first place in spin class. And he's like, I always knew you could. One thing that he was tough sometimes, you know, but he always believed in me. I didn't mean to get emotional, but he was one of the people who really believed in me. Always, even when we didn't agree. And that was kind of a lot. And that support really meant a lot to me. Yeah. And I'm just really happy that he got to see me grow up, graduate college. So yeah, that's it.
He said, haven't you had that kid yet? And I was about 7 to 10 days overdue. And every day he'd go over to check something and he'd drop by because I'd be out in the yard. He said, haven't you had that kid yet? And he's meant a lot to my boys. And especially Matt has really gotten to know him. And they're sad they aren't here today, but he was at Walt's funeral. So. But that's the story I have. I mean, he'd always stop by and say something when he was over there. So.
Go ahead.
Phyllis and Walt first got married, times were tough. They were real tough. They lived in the little trailer house across the way. And it was a bad year. The crops didn't come in.
Beets got frozen ground.
Beets got frozen ground, and there was nothing. And you all know Walt. I see some of my friends from back in that time, and they knew Walt then. Now. And you see that car back there? We had a dream. I'd come and live with Phyllis during on the weekends, and we'd go over there, and we spent Thanksgiving afternoon after harvest was gone, and we couldn't do anything. And we talked about clearing the junk out. We went out in the tree row and found this old junk sedan, and we started with the cutting torch and the pliers and the chisels and the handle. So all by hand. We narrowed that car down and made a frame. And every night for that whole winter, we built this new car with all these new rules. And every piece of that suspension was either on something that we just found some old junk that we tried to make. It's got a 1948 shifter. The old 1948 Ford shifter that's got, it was my first car. I couldn't, it burned up, so didn't have any, but we had to wait to fit it in there so that you could shift the gears. And if you've been in there and looked at that car, it's kind of small. Walt's only about this tall, right? But he built it just for him. And I couldn't ever get it, but we worked on every piece of that thing. We bent those, him and Paul built those rollover bars by sticking them in the duals on the dually on the tire and driving forward. And I can remember welding that hood on there, trying to get that hood bent. You know, we tried to make it fancy, but we didn't have any money to buy a fancy hood. He dreamed of it like this, but we couldn't make that by hand, but we did our best. And that number on the side, he said, Bruce, I want you to make something on the side to make it really stand out. So I was taking drafting at the time at school, and I made this perspective drawing, and they said, well, how about this? And we put it on there, and he took it to the painter, and we painted it on there. And there it is, still there, same one, same colors. You notice there's some dents on the top. You know, life has some bumbles and stuff, and we had a new type of transaxle that we put in there. And him and Lloyd took that out, and I couldn't, damn it, I was on the way, but I couldn't get there in time. He took it out on the track, and the first time he went around that track, he hit a bump, and that son of a bitch rolled over. Those bars in that cage protected him. They did a good job. They protected him pretty well. But the suspension, it just wasn't gonna work. But you'll never guess what we got. We got those springs off of an old junk bolt trailer, because they were the right size and the right stiffness. You had to have it too stiff, it bounced too much, too soft, it stayed down, but they were the perfect stiffness. And we put it in there. And at one time, the gas tank was a keg of beer. And so that car has, you know, we didn't have a power drill that we could do things. We did everything by hand, because we didn't have a machine shop. I mean, we just spent a lot of times, had a dream, went out and found the pieces and put them together. And he kept working hard, and then I worked with him during the summer, and we started farming. And little bit by little bit, and Jimmy was around at that time, and little bit by little bit, we'd have a time, but we'd always take the time to get our people together and race. I've seen times when we come around to racing, and during the heat racing, we'd break off a tire spring. We'd get it wrecked, and you'd break the whole thing off. One time we just tied that son of a bitch up with a piece of chain and welded it on, and we were back in about an hour and won the race. So he didn't brag a lot about it, but he sure was proud of it. And he spent a lot of years He said that's 16 years and 16 High Point trophies. And that's just about, that was his goal, but he came damn close. If you look at if you could find a record book someplace, if he wasn't at High Point trophy in all those years, he was right nip and tuck. They made the rules around it.
There's a whole bunch of the trophies up there, but the High Point ones are in the house.
The High Point ones are the big ones, and these are all the trophy days.
The High Point ones are in the house.
Yeah, High Point ones are in the house. And that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And our dad was one that contributed a lot, so he spent a lot of time in the trailers, and all of you guys around probably heard him listen.
And who was the announcer?
So, in the shaky time as time goes, he moved around and they moved into this house over here.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of beer and a lot of ham, a lot of stuff that we were working on cars and said we're gonna fix this house to move into, and we did.
Yeah.
And that summer, it was the summer after our dad lost the farm, and so they were like my family. That's where Linda and I landed. And they took good care of it, so talk about hard work. He did, and I loved it. Phyllis was just getting pregnant, and about the time I went to school, then she had the baby. I put up with her big summer. And then I never got to know Mark until he was a big man. And Andy, I kept hearing stories about this kid who could run cross country right over here. And he looks and is built just about like my son. My son's a little cross between the two of them. He's a little taller, a little heavier. He does Ironman. Yeah. It's all from this willingness to work hard, love the family, and you know, it's not just things that people do. It's the spirit that people have that I got from Walt. You two girls, gosh, this is a bonus I did never expect to see you two guys. We used to spend so many good weekends up in the mountains, camping. Remember I went up to, what the hell was it, that dam up in South Angostura.
Yeah.
We had such a good time up there.
And you kids were pretty little then.
And so you talk about all that spirit, and I'm so glad to see it in all of you kids. You got a story. You met him one time.
Maybe
Did he ever tease you?
Yes.
What did he tease you about?
I mean, a lot of stuff. Like,
What really made you smile that you didn't want him to know made you smile? What did he tease you about?
I would do gymnastics outside the house, and he wouldn't like tease. I don't really know. He was just like,
Say, you were doing gymnastics and he was cheering you on, wasn't he?
yeah.
love that.
And he was.
My favorite thing about Walt, was always this big grump, right? I always made him give me stand-up hugs. Like I was leaving, like this guy, he doesn't give hugs to people. Like who is this guy? I always made him like, nope, I'm leaving. You got to give me a stand-up hug, and he'd get out of his chair, and he'd always do it. Yeah. So that was the thing I liked doing because like I was the youngest of the seven.
Yeah.
You know, if there were, I mean, they had other siblings, but I'm just kind of everybody's little sister. But so Walt was always like a grump around people, and then I'd come along and he was the nicest guy ever, and I knew he could be a grump, but I was like, whatever, it's Walt, he'll be nice. And so anytime I'd leave, no matter what, I'd be like, nope, you have to give me a stand-up hug, and he'd get up, and he'd give me the hug, and he would always just be a big old softie around me, and that was fun. I like doing that to him because it just kind of poked the bear and be like, I know you're your big softie.
Here's one of his other news.
I don't have a very loud voice. I don't know.
Come here. That's what the microphone is for. So you can walk the top in there.
It might be flipped off, but it's easier.
Yeah,
There's a Andy will get it.
Yep.
There you go.
Be obnoxious with it.
No, we just want to hear you.
I know you made him a softie,
It was fun.
but I had the privilege of being the oldest niece, and I'd like to think that Jeanette and I softened up quite a bit before anybody else came along.
Thank you. Not enough.
Our uncles, our uncles, and especially my Uncle Walt, has always held a really special place in my heart. I'm going to do this.
You're fine.
He was there at a time when we didn't have a father, and he didn't hesitate to step in and play and be, you know, in that role. But he was good about it. And I want to tell all of you that think that he maybe wasn't proud of you. There's not a single one of you sitting in this room here that I haven't heard accolades and accolades and accolades about. I retired from my job last August, and I don't miss my job. I loved my job. I worked there 40 years, but I don't miss my job. But I sure do miss my Uncle Walt coming in, and I'd look up from my cubicle, and he'd be sitting there, or standing there, and he'd say, "Well, hi, Brenda," with this grin that I just hold so dear to my heart. And so I miss my Uncle Walt. I miss hearing about your gymnastics, Clara, and I miss hearing about Ben and Zeb and Alex. I miss hearing about all you're doing, and Kathleen and everybody. He couldn't have been more proud of this family, and I hope you all know that. So I do want to give my Aunt Phyllis a lot of credit too, because I know there were times when he wasn't the easiest person to live with, and my Aunt Phyllis just really made everything possible. She embraced us. I loved spending time with her as a child. I loved spending time with her as an adult. And so I want to just thank you, Phyllis, because you made it special. As I grew and I had a family, I love how my kids had the opportunity to meet Uncle Walt and to come out here and hunt. And we came out here and cut Christmas trees a couple of times. Those are memories that my boys have. My husband, Monty, and Walt had a special bond. I never knew my Uncle Walt liked to talk on the telephone, because whenever I talked to him on the telephone, it was a pretty quick conversation. But he and Monty could talk hours away, and I know Monty misses that too. So, yeah, so I miss my Uncle Walt. I do. But I just want you all to know how absolutely proud he's been of his whole family all this time. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Bruce and Mother.
Through the years, I came to appreciate him a lot. Our son was racing in Cheyenne in the late 80s, I think it was, the early 90s, and Walt and Phyllis made the trip down from Alliance to go to Cheyenne to see him race, and he was the encouragement to, he didn't just encourage people, the family. He told her, if you do this, it'll improve your driving and stuff, and it really impressed me that he had this almost inborn understanding of racing, and he could communicate that to another person that was just starting out. And so I really appreciated Walt. I got the privilege of being in his pit crew, and he would go up to the kind of a show and tell, I guess, during, after he had quit racing, but they had for old time. Can I say that? Old timers? Vintage, yeah. Not old timers, but vintage races there. And so I got to visit and know him a lot better there than I ever had before, because what are you going to do in the pits but talk, right? And so we really, Dee Dee and I both really enjoyed knowing Walt, and Dee Dee and Phyllis were good friends from the time they were little ones, so I kind of came in on their shirt tail, so to speak. So I really do miss Walt.
Feel free to kind of look around, visit, whatever, look under the hood. Huh? Yeah, this is the one that I hit with the camera. Yeah. Isn't that this one, Mom?
Which one?
It was in the back, the video.
Yeah, that's the video.
Yeah. So this one I was about 2 years old, and Mom was filming it with one of those old video cameras from 1974, and I was in the back, and I was beating on it with a hammer as he was driving. And I still remember this. He'd get out and say, "Mark, were you beating on that with a hammer?" "Yes." "What did I tell you to do? Did I tell you to not do that?" "Yes." "Are you going to do it anymore?" "No." And then he'd go and then bam, 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 bam. And he'd get out. He was very patient with me when I was 2. That only lasted about maybe another year. But it went on about 4 or 5 times. And you can see on the video, just he keeps getting out. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Mark, are you beating on that with a hammer?" "Yes." "Did I tell you not to do that?" "Yes." "Are you going to do it anymore?" "No." And just going to get bam, 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 bam. So that's this. This was, he refurbished this when, Mom?
About 5 years ago or so? Maybe 5 or 6 years
Yeah, it was.
ago.
It had been basically rotting in the trees, right? I mean,
No, it was in the building most of the time.
but I mean, it was in
It
pretty
had
bad shape.
been sitting out for
It was in
quite
pretty
a
bad shape.
while.
Yeah. So.
He was really, really proud. The back.
Yeah.
The back
Yeah,
cover.
he did a lot of work on
He
that.
was so proud of that because he told me that the guys at the shop said it couldn't be done, and he went back and
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
"You want to make a bet? I just did this."
Yeah,
He
yeah.
loved doing that.
Yeah, he did.
So which engine ended up in that yellow shed?
It's a GTO. Jim
Same
was
one that they
telling
put
me.
in there a long time
Yeah.
ago.
That's a GTO engine?
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little bit about that GTO engine. You know where the history of that came from? There was when they had, about that time frame, they had what they called a super stock class. A place where you can break the rules and put anything in it. And the guy up from Cheyenne was just coming up, he'd smoke everybody up with Scotch Blackie. So Walt and Paul decided that was enough of that. They're gonna show them how to do it. So Walt had a 55 Chevrolet. What was his number? Number 43.
43.
Yeah.
I was wondering if he threw that thing this way or what, but he probably judged. But he took that 389, the GTO engine, and put it in that 55 Chevrolet, which is a lot of power for a light car. Because the only thing you could put in there legally was a 327. But the superstar stock class, he put that in there, and it had a Rochester carburetor in it, big 4-mill Rochester carburetor. Not very good for racing, but it was pretty big, the biggest carburetor you could get on there. He'd come around the corner with that thing. Paul would drive that thing and it'd open up and shatter, and then he'd go around the corner, and that old Rochester carburetor, you couldn't adjust it for the turning, and it flooded the outside and started the inside, and it'd start sputtering and coughing going around the corner. Then he'd come around down the corner, and as it pick up, it all of a sudden catch all that fuel in there, get equal it, and it'd just take off and pick up. It'd pick up that left front tire off that car about this far off the ground. And he'd pass a bunch of, but he never could get it so that he'd stay fast around the corners. But it was a lot of fun to watch him run that. So he ran pretty good in there. So the car
He'd
just,
work hard, but he'd play hard too.
yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
But we didn't hear those stories until we were older.
We probably didn't either.
I can remember some.
I didn't see any pictures of his Sweet 16 car, the one he made just before
Yeah,
this.
we had a hard time finding it.
So his Sweet 16,
There was one, the Sweet 16 he sold.
he sold that.
Yeah,
Oh,
a
okay.
long time ago.
Was it a good one?
Yeah, and I don't know that we had. There's
Oh,
probably some
okay.
pictures somewhere, but we had a hard time finding things. How old are
So Walt liked to live right next to the edge of the rules. He'd keep the rules right. He would not break the rules.
No, he wouldn't break the rules, but he'd go as far as close as he could.
There
I
was
think
a-
I learned that from him.
There was something I learned from him.
I'd toss him.
So one night, they're always racing between him and who's that? Godwin or Mike Crawford?
Mike
Crawford?
Crawford?
in Crawford?
Yeah.
Dwyer Goodman.
Dwyer Goodman.
Yeah,
And when they challenged the car, they put what, $500 up
yeah,
on their
quite
car?
a bit.
And they said, and they tore the cars down. They took the engines out, tore them down to find out what takes the problem, to see which one is legal and who's not. Well, Godwin had a Ghost 302, right? They always called Walt's a Ghost 302, but we were right at 300, which was the limit. And he said that they challenged him because we kept beating him, and he was illegal, or he was running, and then that 302 that he bored out was running the time. He kept saying, "You can't beat me," because he's thinking, "You can't beat me because I'm legal, and I'm illegal, and I still beat you. You can't beat me." So you can't figure out what the rules is. So they spend all the night. They pulled all the cars. They pulled the cars over the shop at the end of the racetrack, and they tore everything down and measured everything out. And the guy got up. "You can't beat." He ran the numbers, ran the calculations on that. He said, "This can't be right. This can't be right." And then Dale Nelson, he was the honor guy. He says, "What's the matter?" He says, "I'm looking at that engine block, and it can't be a 283 engine block. It can't be. It's not right. It's not forward strike." And Dale takes his screwdriver, and he pops it right on the body. And the difference between the 283 engine and the 302 was right there was a place that was cast different around the water pump, and they had filled that thing in with body putty to make them think it was a big. So there comes Walt. Tear it down or not, he got the money, and away they go. Yep. Got the money, won the races, and that's it. Yep. Living next to the edge doesn't mean that you're breaking the rules.
He lives next to the edge.
Yeah. That's a danger zone. Yep. I think they wrote that song about him.
No. Yeah, Mel was his later years.
I got one thing I'll say that I'll remember the rest of my life. And we had a little wheat farm out west, and I always told Walt, I says, "When you sell your wheat, you let me know, because I want to sell the same day you do." And he would. He'd let me know. And he says, "I want to tell you a lifelong lesson. You'll never go bankrupt selling for a profit." And it does. You sit down and think of it. You never, throughout the whole thing. Yeah. So, yeah. And when he parked that equipment in here, I don't know, because there's no lines in the floor or nothing, but he had that stuff where it was parked just this close to each other, so it would all fit. It would just, I don't know how long, because I was here for that race. He called me and he wanted me to come out and help put the cars back up. And so he had everything out, and I said, "Well, Walt, do you want me to help you get stuff back in?" He says, "Oh, it'll take me a while." And but I still remember when we put them cars up there the last time, and he got it cleaned up, but he had that John Deere with the loader up out here, and they got up part way, and the cylinder started leaking. So we set it. Yeah, he set it down, and he put some more oil in, and he says, "We got to do this real fast." And I was up here, and he was lifting that up, and I thought he had to have it just perfect. I mean, but we wasn't that far from the ceiling, and I thought, "Oh man, this whole building's going down." And then I didn't know with the oil coming out if we was going to get it up there or not, but it all worked out. Yeah. So.
We had it down one time for the parade when we reopened the racetrack out here, and we put it on the truck and had it in the parade, and that was a lot of fun too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's one of the loader tractor and how
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't really know that much about my grandpa, but what I know is that he was a pretty hard worker. Yeah, I'm working hard, but he tried. He really, really, really tried. He's been there by my side for 10 and a half years. Actually, no, 11 and a half years.
Thank you, sir.
I've been here almost 52 years with him, and like they said, never a dull day, but it was good. There were times that were tough, but I miss him every day, so thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for your remembrance. It means a lot.
Thanks, everybody.